You wouldn't believe what happened when the people I'd spent 5 years building dreams with, people who called me family, tagged me in office brunch photos, and trusted me with million-dollar clients, fired me the moment they found out I was pregnant. And you definitely wouldn't believe how I ended up signing their paychecks a year later. Before I share what happened next, hit subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're listening from. My name is Elise Carter. 37 now, but this story starts when I was 31, old enough to pretend I had my life together, young enough to still believe loyalty meant something. I lived in Seattle, in a small apartment that always smelled like burnt coffee and lemon-scented floor cleaner. I worked as a brand strategist at a mid-sized creative agency called Thread Plus Root, the kind of place where everyone wore vintage sneakers and talked about finding their purpose, but still hadn't paid off their student loans. I wasn't glamorous. My life wasn't flashy. My biggest flex was paying rent on time and knowing which store carried the cheapest almond milk. But I loved my job. I loved the late-night brainstorming sessions, the pitch decks, the music in the office at 7 p.m. when it was just me and the glowing monitor. I loved the idea of creating something bigger than myself. My boss, Jenna, was the kind of woman other women either envied or feared. Tall, blonde, perfect skin. I just did a Pilates class at 6 a.m. energy. She used phrases like circle back and double down so naturally it felt like she invented them. And she liked me. Or at least, she liked that I kept everything running while she lived on oat milk lattes and vibes. But even with all that, I had this sinking feeling in my gut, like I was always one mistake away from being replaceable. The agency had a way of making you feel like family when they needed you and a line item on a budget sheet when they didn't. Still, I believed in them. Then I saw the two pink lines. It happened on a Tuesday morning. A cold, rainy, typical Seattle Tuesday where the sky looked like wet cement. I took the test before work, mostly to rule out what I already knew deep down. When the lines appeared, my heart didn't drop, it just paused. Like life hit buffering. I wasn't married. My relationship with my fiancé, Darren, was shaky at best. He was in his finding himself phase for the last 3 years. The man had more phases than the moon. But none of that mattered in the moment. I wasn't scared. I wasn't crying. I just stared at the mirror and whispered, "So this is happening." At first, I didn't tell Jenna. I figured I'd wait a few weeks. Keep working. Keep showing them I could handle it. But nausea doesn't care about professionalism. Exhaustion doesn't care about deadlines. I started showing up late to morning meetings because I was busy throwing up saltines in my bathroom. I kept a sleeve of them in my bag like it was a medical prescription. One day, during a pitch rehearsal, I had to excuse myself so fast I didn't even grab my notebook. I ended up crouched in a hallway, breathing through my nose like I was trying to survive a roller coaster. Jenna noticed everything. "You look pale," she said once, handing me a matcha latte I couldn't drink without gagging. "Maybe some self-care this weekend?" I laughed and told her it was just a bug. A 24-hour thing. But she looked at me like she already knew. When I finally told her, 12 weeks in, exactly like Google recommended, she gave me a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, wow. Congratulations. Big news." I tried filling the silence. "I'll work ahead on projects before my leave. I can shift my hours. I don't want this to affect the team." She held up her hand and said, "We'll figure it out." That should have been my warning. 2 weeks later, on a Monday morning at 9:14 a.m., I got the email. Subject line, employment status update. I clicked it, expecting something boring like health insurance forms. Instead, it said, "Due to internal restructuring, your position has been eliminated effective immediately. No severance. No transition plan. No meeting. Just my Slack deactivated and access revoked within minutes." I froze. I read the email again, slower. Restructuring? Funny. I was the one who built half their structure. I called Jenna. Straight to voicemail. I texted her. Nothing. I emailed HR auto reply. I sat in my chair, hands shaking, heart pounding like I'd sprinted a mile. I wasn't just fired. I was erased. Deleted like a typo. Not because I was bad at my job. Not because the company was collapsing. But because I was pregnant. And apparently, pregnancy was bad for business. That night, I couldn't tell Darren the truth. He'd been distant lately, practically living at his friend's place. I didn't want to give him another excuse to drift. So I lied. Told him I quit because I wanted to freelance. That I was ready for a new chapter. He didn't even look up from his phone when he said, "Cool, babe." And that's when it hit me. I was on my own. Jobless. Pregnant. Exhausted. But something inside me shifted that night. A voice whispered, "They think you're done. Prove them wrong." And I planned to. The morning after they fired me, I couldn't get out of bed. Not because I was heartbroken, though I was, but because my body was wrecked. I hadn't slept. My chest felt like it had bricks stacked on top of it. I just laid there, one hand on my barely there belly, the other clutching my phone, hoping I'd wake up and see an email saying it was a mistake. That someone had hit the wrong button. That Jenna would call and say, "We figured it out." But nothing came. No texts. No apologies. Just silence. Darren was already gone. Left a note on the counter that said, "Went to Ethan's. Back late." Like we weren't dealing with a mortgage, a relationship, and a whole human forming inside me. I stared at that note for 10 minutes, like it might rewrite itself if I stared long enough. Then I showered, put on mascara just to feel human, and opened my laptop. If they thought I was going to disappear, they didn't know me at all. The first week, I applied to every freelance gig I could find: Upwork, Fiverr, job boards that paid less than minimum wage just to get experience. I emailed old clients, updated my portfolio, redesigned my website from scratch. I was operating on fear and peanut butter toast. No health insurance. No backup plan. No partner who gave a damn. But I had skills. And I had rage. Quiet, focused rage. A few clients trickled in. A local bakery that needed a menu redesign. A solo coach launching her brand. Nothing big, but it was enough to keep me busy. And busy was better than broken. One night, I was up at 2 a.m., elbows deep in Canva templates, when I had a thought that felt like a spark. What if I stopped waiting for someone to hire me again and built something they'd never be able to fire me from? That's when the idea of Lumen Studio was born. It started as a side note in my sketchpad. Just a name. But over the next few weeks, I built the bones of a brand, my kind of brand. Bold. Modern. Human. No jargon. No fluff. I started writing Instagram captions like I was already an agency. I made free design kits, gave away brand audits, ran webinars where I taught solopreneurs how to clean up their ugly Canva graphics. And it caught fire. By the time I was 5 months pregnant, I had 12 active clients. I'd made more in 1 quarter than I had in 6 months at Thread plus Root. And best of all, no one could fire me. No one could tell me my baby made me inconvenient. Every kick I felt while I worked reminded me why I had to keep going. Meanwhile, Darren was slipping further away. He came home later. Stopped asking how I was. He said things like, "You've changed and you're always working." And once, when I asked him to come to a doctor's appointment, he said, "Can't you just FaceTime me in?" That night, I sat on the bathroom floor and cried so hard I got a nosebleed. Not because I was surprised, but because I finally admitted something I didn't want to. I was already alone. 1 week later, I found out he was texting his ex again. I didn't confront him. I didn't scream. I didn't pack a bag. I opened a new bank account. Moved half my earnings. Quietly set up a P.O. box. And then I filed for separation. He didn't even fight me. Just blinked and said, "I didn't think you'd actually do it." Of course he didn't. Because I'd always made myself small to keep the peace. But pregnancy changed that. Survival changed that. Building something with your bare hands while being abandoned by the people who swore they loved you? That'll burn the old version of you to ash and leave something stronger behind. By the time I gave birth to my son, I was booked out 3 months in advance. I named him Noah. He came early. Quiet. Wide-eyed. Looked at me like he already knew everything I'd been through. And when they placed him on my chest, I whispered, "We're gonna be okay. I promise you that." We moved into a tiny studio above a flower shop. It smelled like lavender and coffee grounds. I rocked Noah with one hand and built pitch decks with the other. I recorded voiceovers while he napped, took Zoom calls with a baby carrier strapped to my chest, and learned to mute my mic mid-cry when things got too much. And slowly, piece by piece, Lumen's studio grew. I hired a VA, then a copywriter, then a junior designer who was a single mom just like me. We became the agency Thread plus Root pretended to be, except we meant it. We didn't care about vibes. We cared about values. And that's when the full circle moment came. I got an email from a marketing director at a mid-size creative agency looking to subcontract a rebrand for one of their tech clients. They'd heard about Lumen through a design blog. The agency? Thread plus Root. I sat there, staring at my laptop, hand over my mouth. Jenna had signed the email herself. She had no idea who I was. Not because I'd changed names or photos, but because she'd never really seen me to begin with. And now, I was the one holding the pen. I read her email again. Hi, Elise. We're a bit short-staffed for Q3 and are looking to outsource part of a rebrand for one of our long-term clients. Your agency was highly recommended, and I'd love to schedule a quick call to explore how we can collaborate. Best, Jenna K., Creative Director, Thread plus Root. I swear my hands tingled. It was like the universe had quietly set the table for this moment, lit a candle, poured me a glass of wine, and said, "Now, let's see what she does with it." I didn't respond right away. I needed to breathe, process, decide. Because here's the thing, part of me wanted to ignore her. Delete the email, block the domain, go on living my best poetic justice quietly. That would have been enough for some people. But the other part of me, the one that had cried in silence after losing her job and her man and still showed up to build a business with a baby on her chest, that part of me wanted something else. Not revenge. Recognition. So I scheduled the call. We met on Zoom the following Thursday. I wore a deep navy blouse and tied my hair up in a sleek bun. My son napped in the other room, white noise playing on the baby monitor next to me. Jenna popped onto the screen a minute late, her camera slightly tilted, hair shorter now, voice still lined with that performative warmth she'd always worn like a designer scarf. "Hi, Elise. Thank you for making time," she said with a smile. I smiled back. "Of course. Happy to chat." She didn't recognize me. Not even a flicker. She launched into the usual agency speak. They were pivoting, had staffing shortages, and were seeking boutique partners with agile workflows. And then she said something that nearly made me laugh out loud. "We're really focused on bringing in collaborators who align with our values, human-centered brands that prioritize inclusivity, empathy, and ethical storytelling." Empathy. From the same woman who erased me like I was a bad draft. I nodded, kept my face neutral. "That sounds like a good fit for us." She asked a few questions about our services, my team structure, capacity. I answered with the polished confidence of someone who had earned every inch of her professionalism. I knew I sounded credible. Bigger than I was. And I let her believe it. She never asked where I came from. She didn't mention the past. And I didn't hand it to her. By the end of the call, she was practically glowing. "Elise, I think this could be a great partnership. Let's have you submit a proposal for the first project. If that goes well, there's plenty more where that came from." I smiled, warm but measured. "We'll get something over to you by Monday." And I did. A beautiful, tight proposal. Market rates. Clear deliverables. No discounts. No favors. No emotional labor. I waited 3 days. Then came the reply. "We're thrilled to move forward with you. Excited to see where this goes. Signed, Jenna." I didn't tell my team at first. I didn't tell my friends. I needed to sit in the moment privately. Let the full weight of it settle in my chest. I was leading a project under the roof that once kicked me out for being inconvenient. And they didn't even realize it. That, to me, was the most poetic part. The next few weeks passed in a blur of meetings, mock-ups, feedback loops. Jenna remained friendly but distant. She never questioned my leadership, never disrespected my boundaries. Maybe because she couldn't afford to. Maybe because I'd finally become someone she couldn't ignore. Halfway through the project, she sent me a Slack message. "Hey, side note. Random question, did you ever work at Thread before? Your name sounds super familiar." I stared at the message for a minute. then typed, "Yes, years ago. I was a strategist there." She replied, "OMG. No way. That's wild. What a small world, LOL." I didn't respond. I let the dots connect themselves. Let her memory drift back to the girl she fired through email. The one with saltines in her purse and nausea in her gut. The one she deemed expendable. I wasn't that girl anymore. A month later, the project wrapped. We delivered ahead of schedule. The client was thrilled. Jenna sent a thank you email so glowing it felt like a love letter. "We're grateful for your brilliance. Your leadership elevated the entire experience. Hope this is the beginning of many future collaborations." I read it once, then again, then clicked archive. Because I was done with that chapter. Not bitter. Not broken. Just done. A few weeks later, a design magazine published a feature on rising women-led agencies to watch. Lumen Studio was number 4. They quoted something I'd said in a podcast. "Sometimes the best revenge is just becoming undeniable." I posted it on Instagram. Simple caption. "Built this during nap times." Noah was 8 months old. Teething. Drooling on everything. I let him chew on the edge of the magazine cover while I made coffee and looked out the window of our now 2-bedroom apartment. We were safe. We were home. And I was no longer surviving. I was soaring. A few months after the magazine feature, I was invited to speak at a Women in Business Summit in Portland. Nothing massive, just a cozy weekend event hosted in a boutique hotel conference room with white tablecloths, artisan tea, and hand-lettered name tags. My panel was titled "Redefining Resilience, Building from Scratch as a Working Mom." The morning of the talk, I stood in front of the mirror in my hotel room, adjusting the simple gold necklace my son had tugged on earlier that week while saying "Mama" on loop. I smiled at my reflection, not because I looked perfect, but because I didn't care to anymore. That girl who once measured her worth by feedback and raises? She was long gone. In her place stood a woman who knew how to walk through fire without announcing the flames. The panel went well. People cried. Women stood up and said they saw themselves in my story. One woman whispered afterward, "You helped me believe I'm allowed to start over." That made the whole trip worth it. On the second day, during the closing brunch, I was grabbing a second cup of coffee when I saw a familiar face across the room. She was talking to one of the sponsors, laughing softly, wearing a blazer too expensive for Portland. Jenna. Her badge read, "Panel Moderator." I hadn't seen her on the schedule. Apparently, she was moderating a panel on leading with empathy in the workplace. The irony nearly made me choke on my coffee. She hadn't seen me yet. And I had a decision to make. I could walk away. Stay silent. Let the universe keep doing its thing. Or I could walk over, not with malice, not with ego, but with the calm, quiet grace of someone who no longer flinches at her past. So I walked. "Jenna," I said gently. She turned, smiling politely, then froze mid-smile. "Elise," she breathed. "Wow. Hi. I didn't realize you'd be here." "Keynote," I replied with a warm nod. She laughed softly, touching the back of her neck. "Of course. I should have made the connection when I saw your name on the program." I almost said something earlier, I said, sipping my coffee, but I figured if the past didn't teach us to notice people, maybe the present should. She swallowed. "Look, Elise, about what happened. I don't know if you want to hear this, but I don't need an apology," I cut in, softly but firmly. "Not anymore." She blinked. I could see her working hard to recalibrate, to find the tone that would keep this moment controlled. But it wasn't hers to control anymore. "I'm glad to see you doing well," she finally said. I nodded. "You know what's wild?" I added, smiling with genuine warmth. "You gave me the shove I needed. I might have stayed if you hadn't pushed me out. And I would have missed all this." I didn't wait for a response. I simply gave a small nod, turned, and walked away. That night, I flew home with Noah sleeping on my shoulder, his soft breath fogging the airplane window. I watched the city lights blur below us and thought about all the women I'd met that weekend. All the stories. All the broken beginnings that turned into brilliant second acts. And I realized, the world doesn't need more noise. It needs more women who rise quietly, with grace sharpened by grief, with peace that doesn't need performance. 6 months later, Lumen Studio was operating with a full-time team of 10. We had 2 interns, a client waitlist, and a new office space that smelled like eucalyptus and ambition. One morning, we got an inquiry through our contact form. It was from a recruiter representing a large holding company, one that had recently acquired several boutique creative agencies across the West Coast. Their request? A potential acquisition conversation. They wanted to meet. I wasn't looking to sell. Not yet. But I took the call. And when they sent me the portfolio of agencies they'd acquired, guess who showed up on page 4? Thread plus Root. Jenna's agency had been folded into a larger brand. She was now listed as a brand advisor instead of creative director. Probably a polite demotion in exchange for a paycheck. The woman who once said, "We'll figure it out," when I told her I was pregnant, was now working inside a system she didn't control. And me? I was on the outside. Independent. Answering to no one. I didn't gloat. I didn't post about it. I didn't even mention it to my team. Instead, I sat down that night, put my phone away, and handwrote a letter to my son. I wrote about what happened. About how people will sometimes shrink you because your life no longer fits their comfort. About how strength is often invisible in the moment, but shows itself when you keep going. I signed it, "For the day you need a reminder of who your mother is." Then I folded it, sealed it, and placed it inside a box labeled "Open when you doubt yourself." A year to the day since I was fired, I sat on my porch holding that same baby, now giggling, standing, trying to eat leaves, and thought. I didn't burn their house down. I built mine. And in the quiet corners of that house, I found a version of myself that no job title, no man, no paycheck could have ever handed me. She was always there. She just needed to be uninvited to bloom. And now, she owns the whole damn garden.